So today we're going to talk the real world rule of money today is something that you may have seen, you may have not seen, but it's something called the X curve. And the X curve is something that the insurance industry has been using for a long time. The furthest back I could actually find something documented about it was in the early 70s. But the X curve looks something like this. Some people call it the law of decreasing responsibility. Some people call it the law of increasing wealth. Some people call it the X curve. But basically, there are two pieces to this principle. Principle number one is that the older we get, so as we go from the left to the right, the older we get, our wealth should increase over time. And then the second part is as we go left to right, from younger to older, that our responsibilities should decrease over time. And notice, both times I said should, because what's interesting is that a lot of financial books or a lot of financial people will give concepts, principles that frankly are kind of not real world rules, and that's why I say that step number one of the Impact School of Money is to teach real world rules of finance where people's wealth should increase over their life. But if you talk to a 50, 60, 70-year-old, you know, this line here where it says wealth, it doesn't look like that. It doesn't. When you're young, you start with nothing, and then it just blasts through the roof, and that's just kind of what happens, and it just keeps going up. And then same thing with responsibilities, and responsibilities meaning children and debt mostly, and being able to provide an income are the responsibilities that a person has when they're younger. So when someone's younger, wealth is low and responsibilities are high. So they have a job that they're getting an income from, some income source, that if something were to happen to them, that income source goes away. They have children that need to be cared for and raised, and they've got a spouse, and then they potentially have some debt or a significant amount of debt that if something were to happen to them, that they would want to see taken care of. And so the idea is that slowly over time, the older we get, if we're applying this principle and we're saving money, our wealth increases over time, thus replacing the cost of those responsibilities. So the first one, if I have an income that I'm providing, and I am increasing my wealth over time, as my wealth increases and I start getting money saved in some sort of retirement fund or otherwise, or real estate or whatever I'm doing, that the income or the interest from that starts to replace the income that I'm getting from a job, and thus replacing that responsibility, that my wealth can replace an income with interest or passive income or rents from real estate or a business. I get enough money saved that if something were to happen, that money could be passed to a spouse to raise children, or it eventually gets to the point where there's enough money saved where you'll hear people use the term self-insured, where self-insured basically means that they have enough money saved that if something were to happen to them, or even if they remained alive, that there's no need for income, no need to have insurance in a lot of cases, or according to them, because they have enough wealth. The wealth has accumulated enough to replace those responsibilities. But to just be totally real, in 13 years of doing this, people have heard of this principle. People, will get their insurance temporarily with the hope and they were sold that their wealth would replace that insurance. And in 13 years of meeting with thousands of people, it's just very rare that I run into somebody that is in that position here on the right of this graphic, where they're older they have no debt, their kids are all moved out and don't need any help, and they've got enough money saved that they can retire and have absolutely zero need for insurance. It's just not a common thing. It should be, but that's the thing, is a lot of the time some of the principles that are taught on paper look fantastic, but in real life they just flat are unrealistic. Because as we get older, our wealth starts to go up, and then we have an emergency and it decreases, and then it goes up and then we lose a job, and then it goes up and we have to help a parent, and then it goes up and then we have to help a sibling that wasn't planning properly, and so on and so on. And same thing with responsibilities. You know, they don't just decrease at a steady downward slope the whole time. There's a lot of the time where we're decreasing, we're getting out of debt, and then we buy a new house. And then it decreases over time, and then we buy a new car, and then it decreases, and we're helping kids with football camp, and then it's decreasing, we're getting it paid off, and then suddenly we're helping them go to college, and so on and so on. And so the principle of today is that the gap in the beginning between wealth and responsibilities, that gap is the rule of thumb, is that is the need for insurance, is the gap between those two things. But depending on the situation, most of the time what I've seen is that the responsibility line, because of inflation, is a little bit more flat. And as people's wealth grows, yes, it starts replacing it slowly, but then they earn more money, meaning that the responsibility stays higher for longer and wants to start having an upward slope because of that they're earning more money as they go along. And so some people could argue that their need for insurance goes up over time, not necessarily down. And so, but the concept here is to know what is your insurance need, being realistic, not being theoretical about what it is, but what is the realistic need for insurance. And so as we meet with our clients to, one, just introduce this principle, educate them on the X curve, the law of decreasing responsibilities and increasing wealth, is to teach the principle in a simple way, but then also to get down to the realistic, real world way that it works, to make sure that we're finding and helping them get the amount of coverage that actually will do what it needs to do when they need it to do it the most. There's our real world rule of money.